All right, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Cameron, for joining us. This is going to be a fireside chat with Cameron Drinkwater. Cameron is Chief Product and Operation Officer at S&P Dow Jones Indices, the world's leading index provider, with over 28 trillion benchmarked to their indices globally. Thank you so much for being here, Cameron.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an exciting day for us.
Yes, it is. And recently, S&P DJI specifically has been making significant moves into digital asset markets, including very recently licensing the S&P 500 for perps markets on Hyperliquid. This was a very, very bold recent move. And we have a couple of things to announce as well later today. So maybe just to start with, I'd love to just take a step back and think about S&P's digital asset strategy, generally speaking, beyond the most recent bringing S&P 500 on chain. Prior to that, you've announced with Centrifuge tokenizing and bringing on chain the S&P 500 token as well. You've also built an index with Denari that is a combination of tech companies and crypto tokens. And today we're going to be announcing more things. So can you just talk about kind of the initial roadmap of S&P and digital assets?
Yeah, so look, S&P has been active in this space for a long time. Chuck and Charles from our ratings team have been active for years. From the index side, though, what started getting us interested is, SPY is 33 years old this year, and SPY was not SPY for the first decade of its life, but it flag planted, and so we know the power of moving first and establishing real use cases in new technology. And so as we started looking at some usage statistics about where the next generation of investors were putting their money, looking for utility, seeking new options, on-chain was a clear solution for many of the things they were seeking. Our brand is valuable because it's known and trusted by institutions and retail alike, and so we move first and early when we have conviction in new products, new technologies, because we need our brand to be firmly planted there as an established entity. And so anyway, for us, about a year ago, we started very selectively picking high-quality players as partners and putting IP on chain where we saw very discrete and tangible use cases. And this will be maybe a theme for me today is it's easy to throw all of our indices in an Oracle or what we'll talk about with Kaiko later today. The technology is there for us to tokenize all of our indices. Two things. One, that's very expensive because you have to maintain it. But number two, we are interested in real live use cases. So we're really getting pulled on chain by partners who have an application for those tokenized indices.
Yep, absolutely. So thanks for giving us the context. And it's true that even beyond DGI, like S&P, generally speaking, has been at the forefront of blockchain and kind of DeFi innovation. And you've been around in the space for many years, including at conferences like ETHCC, that is a very kind of dev-focused conference. So maybe we can say a few words about our announcement today. I'm happy to say that Kaiko and S&P DGI, we've been partnering now in tokenizing one of the biggest S&P benchmarks, the iBox index, and bringing that onto the Canton network. So can you talk about your perspective of how we got to do that and why it matters?
Yeah, I mean, the last panel was a perfect intro. To have DTCC bringing U.S. Treasuries natively onto Canton created a natural opportunity to fulfill the full ecosystem, which is always where we see indices playing a really important role, is these liquid ecosystems developing around the underlying securities and then index-based products built on top of them. So to have DTCC bringing U.S. Treasuries natively on Canton, that was a natural opportunity for us to bring the iBox Treasuries Index also on Canton to give product developers or counterparties a tool to use with the physical underlying also on that chain.
Yep. So maybe to explain a little bit what we're doing, this is not just publishing the price of the benchmark on the network. This is more about actually creating a smart contract token that contains all of the index data. So this is more about a distribution play where S&P, in order to transfer the actual index data, including licensing rights and all of the associated entitlement rights, you would actually transfer the index token to a client. And the client would essentially receive a smart contract containing the index data, but also explicitly having licensing and fees and access control all embedded into a smart contract. So this is really not providing the price of the index into a price token, but rather providing the actual index product through a smart contract token. And I think that matters also from an IP standpoint, because here is more about a distribution play rather than a data play in some way. And so can you talk a little bit about the IP angle for S&P and obviously why that is a critical part of index distribution?
Oh yeah, I mean, one of the great advantages for an IP issuer like ourselves on chain is we actually have better auditability, visibility into how the IP is being used, reporting on that use case, and instantaneous when it's tied to a smart contract, instantaneous reporting and potentially commercial exchange based on that smart contract. Whereas in TradFi, we're dependent on delayed reporting on volumes. Sometimes that's agreed, sometimes in dispute, both for the counterparties and for the underlying IP provider. Then there's multiple months on contract settlement. And so actually for us, the whole timeline pulls in quite considerably, and it's transparent amongst all parties, so far less opportunity for dispute.
Yes, and actually I was thinking about something, which is we talk a lot about crypto asset traceability on the blockchain. We talk a lot, obviously, there's great companies like Chainalysis or TRM that helps track a specific coin once it's being sent over the blockchain. And I think the more we bring capital markets applications on chain, the more we bring data on chain, especially private and IP protected data, the more we need to treat data like a financial asset. And so the idea that we're going to enable through blockchain technology the traceability of data and treat data like a financial asset and trace where that data goes is great from an IP protection standpoint, but it's also great for thinking about how you can programmatically think about all the monetization that is related to the use of your IP in a financial product. And so obviously the idea of tokenizing an index is for product issuers or index-related financial products builders to consume that index product natively on chain and wrap it into a index-linked financial product. And actually having that composability, that is one of the great benefits of the blockchain, but applying this to a data product, I find extremely new and powerful.
Yeah, of course. And actually, one of the things I love about the composability, the construction, is so you can think of the token being the index, and then the smart contract being wrapped around it. And that's the use case specific terms and conditions, audit rights, et cetera. And that wrapping can be tailored to whatever use case clients come to us for. But then it's repeatably usable, it's evergreen, it's on chain. And so actually, in terms of scalability of use cases, if you think of today's licensing regime where clients have to come to us for every use case, it's a new schedule on their MSA, et cetera. This is a very frictionless process of getting new product issued on chain, massively speeding up timelines, but also this reusable infrastructure that really benefits all parties.
Absolutely. And so maybe just a few words. We touched upon it briefly talking about the previous panel, but why iBox first? I think that's an interesting benchmark that we decided we wanted to start with. But could you talk a little bit about why we started with iBox?
So one of the things that differentiates S&P Dow Jones Indices is that we've always been in the business of building liquid ecosystems. So we've always been less focused on benchmarks for the sake of benchmarking, but more for their use in investable products and the ability to create liquid ecosystems around them. And so what do you need for that to work? Well, you need the underlying available. You need index products created on top, and then you need institutional players who want to provide liquidity and actively trade. And it's a great moment because with DTCC putting US Treasuries natively on Canton, you have the underlying, you have a very active kind of treasury institutional trade landscape on Canton with players committed to doing more. And you have real demand for the iBox Treasury Index to be used as a underlying for product issuance on the Canton chain. So for us, all of the ingredients were there for real use cases that drive utility and embed RIP in these transactions. So total no-brainer, and we had a great partner in Kaiko helping us think through the creation of the token and then the creation of appropriate smart contracts to wrap our terms and conditions into.
Thank you so much. And so maybe can we zoom out a little bit from this specific new launch, but can we talk about like all the other areas where S&P or SPDGY specifically is working on digital assets and blockchain initiatives? What else is on your mind?
So look, we've been very, again, utility driven. So clients coming to us with a very specific use case. The centrifuge launch, which you mentioned last year, was driven by this concept of bringing the S&P 500 into an investable token natively on chain. What they announced yesterday was a basically fractionalization of that token to give more utility and mobility at smaller scale. We hope that will unlock additional utilization of it. We'll see. The Denari one that you mentioned was a great kind of brainstorm between the Denari team and us, really looking for this play of like, how do you wrap a buy the ecosystem opportunity into a token? And how do you do that in a way that is hard to replicate in TradFi? And so we crafted this not difficult index, which is the Digital Markets 50, which is 35 equities exposed to the blockchain ecosystem and 15 cryptocurrencies wrapped into a single index, but then Denari is issuing a token that represents that index. And the underlying for Denari, because they have their D shares, is all on chain. And so for us, though, that's an awesome opportunity to package up something that's really hard to replicate in TradFi into a single token and allow retail as well as institutional investors to just buy an ecosystem that they believe is going to appreciate. So anyway, different use cases for different IP, but I think I'm most excited about the innovation that we're pushing today because this concept of tokens wrapped by smart contract language that is very tailored to use cases, but extensible and kind of evergreen on-chain, unlocks so many use cases and scalability of RIP. So we're super excited about today.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting. And I really like the angle of distribution on-chain and being, it's more about how do you service almost a new addressable market that is your existing clients moving to an infrastructure that is programmatic and a little bit more disintermediated. Agree with what was said earlier. It doesn't have to be entirely disintermediated. Not everything has to go. A lot of great things exist in our current financial system. But it's just about making things more automated, more disintermediated, more programmatic, and the transfer of information, the transfer of data. And there's something else, like we, Kaiko, have also an index business, and a lot of our index commercials are tied to AUM and turnover. And so at the end of the year, we're looking at, AUM and numbers, and like all of that is actually quite heavily manual. So one of the great things about blockchain, and we mentioned traceability earlier, but there's also all of the tracking of where your data is used, where your index is used, and being able to on-chain verify what is the AUM related to the financial product that is linked to your index or your benchmark, and being able to do that programmatically as well. So there's traceability, but there's also new kind of economics where you can do daily fee collection based on daily turnover and all sorts of new ways of thinking about the distribution and the monetization of your existing products. It's not necessarily a novel product, it's just a novel way of distributing.
And I think one of the things that is a great advantage of Canton in this use case is that, of course, with ETFs or very publicly exposed products, that reporting is going to be public, but also a lot of our use cases are private exchange swaps or what have you between institutions, and they don't want that public. And so actually the great thing about this smart contract infrastructure is that it works, the reporting is private when it needs to be private, public where it can be public, but back to us nonetheless. And so actually you get the simplification across both use cases, which, in TradFi is not the case.
Yep, absolutely. Cool. I think we're at time and that the counter is wrong. But is there any question in the audience since we won a few minutes by the timer? Nope. All right. Well, if no question, thank you very much, Cameron, and thank you for this partnership.
Thank you for having me.